Hello, ladies, gentlemen, everyone in between and beyond. My name is Taylor, and welcome to my Games of the Year 2022 list. Now, before you say it, yes, I know it's likely the middle of January by the time this goes out. Now, there is a good reason for that. The reason being is I did a list on this already on John's channel, Noiseberry Games, linked down in the description below, but there were two games that I wanted to check out that were that released in December around the time that we recorded it, so I didn't really have a chance to check them out. Now, I feel that December games have always kind of been in a weird spot where they come out so close to the point where people have already made their lists, they're getting them edited, ready to go out. They don't really get a fair shake in that year, so from now on, I will still do a video on John's channel, but if there are any December releases, I will do a revised video here on this channel, just going over, my thoughts on those releases, or maybe changing around my rankings if kind of things have shifted. Which, amazingly enough, this has without those December games. Now, if you've watched that video, and I recommend you do, you would know that I'm holding off, or rather did hold off, because of two games. High on Life, from the one of the creators of Rick and Morty, as well as Squanch Games, as well as Gungrave Gore. So I'm going to talk about those two briefly right now because, spoiler alert, they didn't make the list. For two very different reasons, actually. So I did play both of them on Game Pass, which kind of bumps up their value in my mind. But I found with both of them, the biggest problem was not really good feeling gameplay. So I'll start with Gungrave Gore real quickly. It was a on-rails shooter that you just got to move around in. Like it was very controlled, very minimal input from the player. Yes, you got to move around the environment, but you were still just playing an on-rails shooter. Now, I don't know if the first Gungrave was like this. I never played the original, so maybe just me being, having no knowledge of this and coming in blind was a mistake. But the visuals were beyond cringe and so edgy that I felt like I was going to cut my fingers on the keyboard, and it did not feel fun to play. Now, High on Life, on the other hand, also didn't feel super great to play. It was definitely more fun than Gungrave, but it's just, the jokes for me did not land. Like, I get it, some people loved Rick and Morty. I watched, I think, the first 2 seasons and then stopped watching it, but just when they're allowed to go on too long, or they're not, parsed through to find the best ones, it just does not do it for me personally. And your taste in humor may be different, but when the humor isn't landing and the gameplay just doesn't feel super good, it's just not a recipe for an exciting game. I think the biggest problem is I was bored by it. So for those reasons, these two games have not made my list. If you were hoping they would, sorry about that. Now, let's actually get into my list proper with another disclaimer. I have revamped my list from what was on John's channel with a game that I had unfortunately forgotten I had played this year, as well as just looking at the criteria of time versus money, right? A lot of us spend a lot of money on games and don't have a lot of time to play them. So, in the interest of, being very clear as to how much a game costs versus how much time you're able to get with it, I have revamped my list a little bit to reflect that. Starting off at number 5 is actually going to be Choo Choo Charles. So this little indie game came out in early December. There's that December creep again. It's a really fun little horror experience, played in first person, where you run around this small little island, helping out the people who live there with little side quests so you can get resources or weapons to upgrade your train as you fight, and I quote, a half-train, half-giga spider from hell, whose name is Charles. So it's a really short little experience where, you upgrade your train, you're trying to find these 3 eggs so that you can challenge Charles to a fight to the death, and it, if you just hear that, you're like, oh, this sounds great. And trust me, it is. It's a lovely experience. I got all achievements for the game. There's only 24, but 99% of them are quest related anyway, so as long as you're going out and doing the side quests, you're totally fine. But the game is only about between 2 and 4 hours long, depending on how many times you die, but does come in about $25 Canadian. Sorry, $26 Canadian, or whatever your original equivalent is. So, on the merit of cost, I couldn't put any higher on the list. It was higher on my list in John's video, but then I had to think about how much time I realistically spent with it versus how much money I spent on it. Now, I don't regret that. I love this game. I think it's great. An awesome little experience, and it's made by one person. I think that needs to be taken heavily into consideration when you look at the quality of this game, which I think is great for such a small team size. But I know it's hard to look someone in the eye and say, hey, do you want to spend $25 for this 2 to 4 hour experience that isn't a movie? Now, admittedly, movies aren't $25 here yet, but I'm sure they'll get there. Coming in at number 4 is going to be Model Builder. So Model Builder is, again, one I talked about on my previous list. I think it was a great one to just sit down, relax, listen to a podcast, and just, get creative with things. Now, in the footage you're seeing, I'm putting together a little model figure as one of the story jobs. I tend to just kind of click on the color that it tells me to go with, and then just, kind of move on from there. But if you want to get more creative, unlike me, you can just select the color that the game tells you to, put it on there, the game will checkmark it, but then you can go back and you can put on whatever colors, patterns, or any sort of accents that you want to make to really make it your own, and the game is totally fine with that. So there is the sandbox mode or the story mode. You can play around with either one, but the story just limits you to saying, hey, put on what we want you to first, then if you want to go back and change it, feel free to do so. But to me, this game was a huge nostalgia trip. When I was younger, I played with a lot of little figures that, you had to cut out all the pieces, put them together. You were supposed to either put the little stickers on them using tweezers or paint them. I never painted them, I was terrible with it, but I still had a lot of fun. So this game for me kind of brought back some of that nostalgic feeling. I will say I have not completed the game. It's kind of, I have to very much be in a certain mood to want to play it, and I think that's okay. I have spent 10 hours in the game so far, and it does cost about $23, though there is a plethora of DLC depending on, what kind of fandoms you're into. Say The Witcher or other popular ones are available for it, so it's kind of a base price $23. I could easily see you getting 15 to 20 hours out of the game, and then you can add on with those DLC if it's a fandom you're really interested in. Coming in at number 3 is actually going to be the game I sadly forgot I had played, though that's not for lack of fun, it is for a few other issues. That's going to be Thymesia. This was the big Plague Doctor Souls-like that was announced a few years back that I thought looked really cool. You play as a Plague Doctor looking character that gives you a really nice variety of gameplay in terms of how you want to make your character, with a whole bunch of skills and using all sorts of different abilities, with a whole bunch of skills and different tools at your disposal. So it's kind of like Dark Souls-esque combat with a bit of Sekiro-style customization, in the sense that you can't just pick up a weapon from a dead enemy and go on from there. You have to pick up certain skill shards to unlock certain weapons that you can then use if you have enough mana. That being said, I think there's over a dozen secondary weapons to choose from, so you can really pick the 2 that fit your playstyle and kind of experiment with what you want. Now, with all that being said, the gameplay is a little jank and doesn't feel as responsive as you want it to, especially with a Souls-like, so the hit feedback isn't great. There are certainly drawbacks to this game, but I had a lot of fun with it. I have not gotten all achievements for it, nor do I think I will. It's got a little too much random generation in terms of collectible items, more specifically the lore, which just didn't really grab me. So there are, some not so nice things, but again, it's a good game that sometimes feels good to play, does need some work. As far as I'm aware, it's the first game by this developer, so I think for a first attempt, even if they are veteran developers from other companies, it was a really good first step, and I'd love to see where they go with this. Now, I did pay $30 for the game, and as of beating it, have put in 9.2 hours, so about a third of what I paid so far. But there is a ton of replay value in the sense that it's just a mission select, pick this mission, go here, and replay it at your convenience. It's not you have to go through the whole thing again and again and again. And there are multiple different endings that you can get by just effectively replaying the final boss and making different decisions afterwards. So if that's your cup of tea, you can definitely get more out of this game than what I did. I don't think you're going to get a full 30 hours unless you're really trying, but I could see you comfortably getting 15 to about 20 if you want to push it. One more thing I forgot to mention before I give it a final verdict, you can customize your Estus flask. So in this game, it's a injectable potion that you modify with ingredients. So that means it can up your damage, up your defense, give you a bit of lifesteal. It really wants you to play, for lack of a less tired out phrase, the way you want. It gives you options in how you want your Estus to work, and what weapons you want to take into battle with you. So that combined with the ability to change out your skills at any bonfire, I think is great. It allows for a lot of customization and a lot of flexibility between different situations. As I said, this game does have some good points to it, but it's held back by the slightly off-feeling gameplay that you do get used to after a little while. Coming in at number 2 is gonna be Midnight Fight Express. So this game was a small little indie game that I just happened to see on Game Pass originally. I was like, you know what? I'll try this out. Ended up blazing through the whole thing, and I had so much fun. It's a partially isometric 3D action brawler where you just beat up a whole bunch of thugs and other goons, you know, controlled by the big, overarching mafia boss in hand-to-hand combat. And I think it's really well done. It feels really good. All the hits are chunky. You know, when you see your character punch someone in the face, you can feel it. Like it's not that wet fart kind of slap. It's just a good chunk right in there. It's got some great melee finishers. Firearms are in the game, but they're very limited because they're meant to be more powerful. It just makes you feel, it makes you feel like a badass, let's be real. And it also allows a lot of customization in the character, so as you progress the story, you'll be earning points through your score to purchase new skins, masks, hats, tops, gloves, pants. You can really customize them the way you want to with a whole bunch of different options. And they're cosmetic flair. They appear in cutscenes, they can look goofy as hell, but it's just a lovely little fighter. Now, because I beat it on Game Pass, I don't actually know how much time I've put into it. I did purchase it on Steam recently for $20 because it was on the Steam sale. Though full price, it is $27. Now, I have not beat it on Steam and it doesn't share a save file with Xbox, so I would have to play through it fully on Steam to experience just how much time it would take on average. But I could easily see myself getting 30 hours out of this. I think it took me 10 to 12 to beat it the first time, but all of these levels are, again, level select replayable. The idea is you want to play through them again and again and again to not only get S rank, but also complete any challenges that are associated with the level. Each one usually has 3, and collect 10 golden teeth. Now the golden teeth are just a random collectible you get when you beat up one of your enemies. It doesn't have to be a finisher, it can just be a regular attack, but once you've collected your golden teeth, got your S rank, and got your challenges, you move on to the next level. Once you've collected everything, you can choose to move on to the next level, or just blaze through all the levels in story mode without doing all the S rank challenges and teeth if you want. There are 40 levels in total. Not all of them have the same number of challenges or golden teeth because some of them are purely just boss fights, but again, I could easily see 30 hours, no problem, and still having a lovely time with this game. Now, normally John would put in honorable mentions here, and I would as well, but because of the games that I've played this year not feeling great, I'm gonna make this section just a bit of a letter to Devolver Digital, and especially Flying Wild Hog. Now, they're the ones who originally published and developed, respectively, the Shadow Warrior series, or at least the Shadow Warrior Redux, so the new Shadow Warrior games. Now, I really enjoyed 1 and 2. They played very differently to each other, and they were still relatively well put together. Shadow Warrior 3, though, just felt like a wet fart, like a contractual obligation that just didn't have enough time, and not a lot of care put behind it, It's very short, the levels are very linear compared to, especially the second game, and it feels so much more limited than what it was. It feels like it's almost like Shadow Warrior 1, but then worse because you have fewer skills, less interesting environments, and just the character doesn't feel great anymore. It feels very tired, very worn out. The story is just kind of done. The gameplay felt okay, but it was not great. A lot of not necessarily well thought out or well fleshed out ideas. The other problem is, in addition to that, Trek to Yomi, again, same publisher, same developer, looks fantastic. It looks like a Kurosawa film brought to life that you can play. Like, it's all black and white. It's got amazing, I think it's 2.5D graphics because it's usually a side-scroller, but then sometimes flips to a 3D perspective, but is always rendered with 3D characters. I'm not 100% sure what that's classified as. Anyway, it looks fantastic, and then it just doesn't feel quite right to play. So when I mentioned Thymesia, kind of doesn't feel quite right, but then you get used to it. This one just never quite makes it. It never feels like it should. There's almost no hit feedback, and nothing feels very heavy. Everything feels very floaty. The dodging is just not great. It's not well tuned. And I think it's a game that has a lot of passion behind it, especially in its presentation, but needed more time to develop the gameplay. And finally, the last game that, again, Devolver Digital published and Flying Wild Hog produced, that came out this year, is Evil West. Now, I haven't played Evil West, though I've heard good things about it. I've seen good reviews, even though it's probably a short 10-ish hour experience, which is actually longer than Trek to Yomi, but about as long as Shadow Warrior 3. So I can't really comment on that, but what it feels like is Devolver Digital split up Flying Wild Hog into these 3 teams to work on these 3 games that all came out in the same year, that aren't necessarily cannibalizing each other, but they're all suffering from having a smaller team work on them. Now, Shadow Warrior 3, again, feels like a contractual obligation. It feels almost lazy, so I feel like the team didn't necessarily want to work on that one as much. But then Trek to Yomi and Evil West feel much more like a passion project that maybe could have used a little more time in the oven. So I think Devolver Digital especially really takes my dishonorable mention for this year. Just focus on one game, have your team work on one game, something they're passionate about, something they want to do, and I think come out with a lot better product, not these 3 middling to potentially good games. Anyway, I just had to throw that in there because those were 2 games I was really looking forward to this year that just really did not turn out well and did not give me hope for the future of Flying Wild Hog. Moving on from that, it's our number 1 game, or rather my number 1 game, God of War Ragnarok. I'm kidding, it's Elden Ring. Of course it's Elden Ring. I don't own a PS5, so I haven't played God of War Ragnarok. I did pick up the God of War 2018 on PC this year, but I have not played it yet. But I mean, come on, I've put in damn near 200 hours in Elden Ring, which to many of you are going, that's nothing. To me, though, that's a lot. So for those of you who have seen the podcast, have seen other bits of media that I've spoken about, I don't tend to replay games unless I'm, say, going for all achievements or have something that I feel I still need to do in the game. Now with Elden Ring, I got all achievements maybe 30 hours, 40 hours back, but I've kept playing it. Not on my own, mind you. I've played it with Chris and John. That will be linked in the description down below as well. Just, I've been a huge Souls-like fan since Dark Souls 3, which John got me into. I've spoken about this on our podcast. Link for that will be in the description down below. But to me, Elden Ring was a fantastic next step for the genre as a whole. I'm not saying they all need to be open world. I'm okay with them not being open world. It's just the variety of combat and the variety of weapons and playstyles that are available to the player that can still feel valid, still feel viable for most, if not all, of the game. I think having that variety, having that openness in the fashion souls, in the different weapon types, in having weapon abilities you can put on to completely different weapons was great. And I think just the openness of it all was awesome. The bosses were, I think, some of the highest highs and maybe not the lowest lows. I'll save that for Dark Souls 2. But the bosses were definitely a roller coaster, but I think they trended on the good side, on the high side there. And it was just a fantastic experience that I would love to go back to when, you know, the DLC drops. Hopefully it does. And just 3 years from now, load it up again, start a new character, and just try a completely different playstyle. It's drawn me in a lot more than the other mainline Soulsborne games have. I don't know if that's because it's open world, I don't know if that's because it feels like it has a lot more variety, but it doesn't feel like it would get nearly as stale as quickly. So yeah, that's my list for the games of 2022. Also, I should mention that Elden Ring is about $80 Canadian or your regional equivalent, but you can easily get past 80 hours, so it's well worth your money. But yeah, that's it for my games of 2022. I know it's a little late in, well, technically it's the next year, but I think this is a better way of doing things because it allows me to cover games that came out in December in that really end time period that's really hard for games to make the list. And I think a lot of games get overshadowed because of it, or outshined because of something that came out 3 months before that people have had time to play through, sit with, and really think about. And with that being said, please, let me know your games of 2022. You know, what did you play? What did you like? What did you dislike? What did you think was really worth your money? What did you think wasn't worth your money? I'd be curious to know all of these so I can add them to my wish list. Ideally on Steam, but if they're console games, shout those out too. I'd love to know what you guys play and what you're interested in especially. With all that being said, I will leave it here. Thank you so much if you sat through this long video. I really appreciate it. I know it's not too different from John's or the one on John's channel, but I will try to make sure that if a video like this does go up on my channel, it is different than anything I may have done previously on someone else's channel. Again, thank you so much for being here. I look forward to an entirely new year and new content. I promise I will buckle down and try to put out more than what I have been. It's been a bit of a rocky road, but it's gonna smooth out soon, and I hope you'll stick with me for it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!